So in this video, we're going to show you exactly how to replace the front wheel bearings in your Harley-Davidson motorcycle with or without ABS. And just note that in the very near future, we're going to release a rear wheel bearing installation and removal video. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and bell icon so you're notified when we put those new videos out. Now, before we get wrenching, there's some important things you need to know. Now, some guys change their wheel bearings at every tire change, but Harley recommends that you inspect them at every tire change and replace them if necessary. And you do this by inserting one finger into the inner bearing race and rotating it in both directions, and it should rotate smoothly and freely. And if you feel any drag, rough rotation, or abnormal noises, you should replace them. So on my 2014 Street Glide Special sitting behind me on the lift, the front wheel takes two bearings. One is an ABS bearing, it's encoded. The other is a non-ABS bearing. And if you have a non-ABS bike, then you just use the regular bearings. You won't need the encoded one. And so if you have a non-touring, you too have two bearings in your front wheel, so this video will work for you too. And if you're wondering, the Harley bearings are running about $30 a piece. In this video, we're going to be using a Jim's bearing puller and installation tool. It makes the job a lot easier and you know it's done correctly. I will put a link in the description below to the exact tool we use, and we're going to show you exactly how to use it in this video. Now, as you can see, I already have the front wheel removed, but don't worry, I will pop a card on the screen and put a link in the description below to our very detailed Harley front wheel removal and install video. With that said, what do you say we get wrenching? Okay, so with the front tire off the bike, we are going to start on the primary side. And when we refer to the primary side, that means that's the side that the ABS sensor bearing is on. Now, on this side, it is tan and green in color, more tan than green, and you can see that. We also know that it's the primary side with the speed sensor bearing, because the speed sensor, when we take the wheel off on the front of this bike, is on the left side. So there's a couple ways to determine that. And if he spins that around, you'll see that the non-primary side, the non-speed sensor bearing, has a black ring around it. Now, just note that these are stock bearings out of the factory. Okay, so we are using the Jim's tool. It's a bearing removal and installation tool. We will link to it in the description below. Before we do anything, we're going to show you how this tool works and how it goes together so you can get a visual of what we're going to go through here in a minute. In his right hand is the extractor tool, and we'll show you it's got a lip on it. We actually have to kind of seat that down in the bearing, but again, we'll get to this. The other, in his left hand, is the expander dowel, and you'll see how it's flared on one end. That's because it's actually going to go through the axle where the axle will go. So that's going to go through the wheel, and then it's going to go into there. We're actually going to have to use tools, and that flared portion is actually going to go down into the body of the extractor tool. It's going to push those wings out, and that's going to jam it in the bearing. So then we can go ahead and push the rest of the hardware on and pull the bearing. And you'll note on the end of the expander dowel is a hex head. Okay, so on this front wheel, there is just a bearing on each side of the wheel. This is the primary side. It's the tan and green bearing, as you can see there. As you look down inside the bearing, you'll see a ridge or a channel. That's where the stock spacer is in there, and the bearing sits on top of the spacer. Now, with our extractor tool, you'll note that it has right on the very right side of it there at the bottom, it's got ridges or lips that protrude. Those are going to actually go into that channel. And we'll show you how to get those in there, but that's what you're looking for when you hear this tool snap into place in a moment. And just to note that your kit is a universal kit. This is a 25 millimeter extractor tool. Also in the kit is a 3/4 and 1 inch. So just note that you're using the right one. These are 25 millimeters. So the way he does this is he's not going to hammer it hard, but he's going to seat that extractor tool up there. Just give it a little knock there to get those lips into the bearing. You don't want to just keep hammering down. Now he's going to push down and feel for the lips to go into that channel. and you heard it there, snap, and so we know that's seated in the channel, so that's what you want to look for. So in his hand there, he's got a 3/8 Allen, and then he's got the expander dowel. And he's just looking through there, and he's going to push that through because the extractor tool is on this side, and you can see it come through there. So that's what you want to line up. So in his hand there is the main puller body, and he's going to put that over. We're going to show you how this hardware goes right over the extractor tool. And then he's going to put on large brass washer on with the large nut. You can't mix these up because they're different sizes. And he'll just screw that down until it's kind of seated up against the washer there, no big deal. Then he'll take his smaller washer, put it on the end of the protruding expander dowel there, and then the little nut. Okay, so what he's got going on here is he's got his 3/8 inch hex head wrench through the channel there where the axle normally goes, and he's got it in the end of the expander dowel, and then he's just got a wrench on it, a box end around the Allen just for leverage. And he's going to hold that while on the other side, he's got an 11/16 socket, and you can see he's on that smaller nut. And that's 100 inch-pounds that torque wrench is set to. So make sure you use a torque wrench set to 100 inch-pounds. That assures that the expander dowel gets pulled into the housing and you don't go too far or not enough. 100 inch-pounds will make sure that it's seated in there properly. All right, so we've used the smaller nut there. That was to get the expander dowel into the housing. Now he's got a 5/8 wrench. And you can see the flat spots on the extractor tool. It's threaded, but you can also see flat spots. That's so a wrench can fit on there. So he's got a box end wrench there. And then for the large nut, we just used a big crescent wrench there. And he's basically going to hold with one wrench, or you can actually turn them against each other if you want. But he's going to start tightening that larger nut down. And you've heard it break there a little bit. That means the bearing's unseated and it's starting to pull out. Now he's just going to keep cranking as the bearing gets pulled out here. And you can see as he's continuing to turn it, you can see the actual bearing coming up out of the hub there. When you take the bearings out, make sure you see which way that they're in there. Obviously, that's got an orange one on it. That's our speed sensor ABS bearing. It's encoded, and it's got the groove, and that goes to the inside. So you just want to note things like that as you're taking things apart. And just real quick, we'll get right back into your video. As you can imagine, a lot of man-hour expenses and effort go into keeping this channel going strong. There is a way you can support us by becoming a patron member. I'll link to it in the description below. There are benefits for becoming a member, such as t-shirts and stickers. You get access to the private Facebook group, which is a troll-free zone. It really is nothing but bikers helping bikers in there. Access to podcasts early, live video broadcasts and chat, premium videos, and of course, access to those ride, meetup, and events. We appreciate you considering becoming a member. Now let's get back into your video. All right, and then you'll want to reach in and remove your spacer. Okay, so to get the bearing out of the actual tool, he's got a 3/8 hex head going in the expander dowel, and then he's got an 11/16, and he's going on the end of the other end of the expander dowel. He's going to remove this hardware, and now he's pulling the expander dowel out there, and he can take the large nut off the extractor tool. And now he can pull the extractor tool out there with the bearing still on it. And he can give it a quick smack with a dead blow hammer just to get those lips to clear. And he can pull the extractor tool out of the bearing, which we'll dispose of. All right, and he can go ahead and flip this front tire over. We're going to work on the non-primary side, and that's the side with just a regular bearing. It is not a speed sensor bearing. All right, and same thing on the other side, extractor tool, just popping it down to clear the lips there. And remember, it'll go all the way through now. There's nothing on the other side, so he's going to push down until it clears the bottom of that bearing and then pull back up so it's seated properly and it's expanded enough that it'll sit in there and not fall through. And again, with this 3/8 hex head, he's just going to put the expander dowel through there, looking for it to come out the other side here, which is the extractor tool. And I'm going to go on with the main extractor body, large brass washer, large nut. Just seating that up against the brass washer there, on with the small washer and the small nut. Again, that's the end of the expander dowel. And obviously he's got his 3/8 hex head in there, and he's just putting that wrench on it again to give him some leverage. Coming around the other side, 11/16 socket, and we're just looking for 100 inch-pounds on that torque wrench, just until it pops there. That way we know the expander dowel is properly seated in the extractor tool housing. And now with this 5/8 wrench there, you can put it over the extractor tool, the flat spots there. Following up with his crescent wrench, he's going to start tightening things down, or at least turning them against each other there. You heard it pop. that means the bearing is on its way out. And you can see as he's turning again, the bearing coming up out, and there it is unseated. And you'll note again that this is black, and note the way it is. Now this one, you can see as he turns it, it does not have a groove on it. So just be aware of those things so everything goes back correctly. Okay, so our bearings came out pretty nicely. If you have an older bike or they're seized up for some reason and they don't want to pull, and you could do this either way. If you are a little concerned, it can make pulling them easier. And what you're going to do is add some heat. Now, in your Jim's toolkit comes some stickers. They turn black when you get to 210 degrees. And you'd basically take 2 or 3 of those stickers and put them on the outside parts. He's going to point around to some outside parts of your rotor wherever you want. And then just make sure when you're applying heat, you apply it to the bearing hub itself. Don't apply it to the stickers directly. You want the heat to radiate out, and then it will turn those stickers black again. Don't go over that. When you reach 210 degrees, stop. Get your puller on there as fast as you can, and they should extract. But that's the use of heat to remove bearings. Okay, so this comes in your Jim's bearing removal and installation kit. This is the installation tool. It's a long bolt threaded, as you can see. Now this is actually going to go through where the axle goes here in a moment, but we want to show you how it's set up so that you do it properly. So we're going to do the primary. You want to do the primary bearing first. That's the speed sensor, the ABS bearing, which is on our left side. So just make sure that you have your speed sensor side first. What he's going to take here, your kit comes with a bearing, and that's not the bearing that goes in your wheel. That's just a bearing that slides over the actual rod there. And the next thing that goes on is your backing plate. And he'll slide that on. They go all the way up. So that's going to go in his right side of the wheel, and he would push that through now, and we'll set up the other side. So it's pushed through now, and he can set up the other side. And so he's going to go, and I want you to note, this is our speed sensor ABS bearing. You'll note this is a Harley branded one. It is orange or red, whatever you want to call it. That's the side that goes in. And then the gray side goes to the outside. You'll also note that it's machined and grooved right next to the red side, and that's the one that goes to the inside. So he'll actually place that on the installation tool, and there's 3 different sizes of installation tools. So in your kit, this is the 25 millimeter because that's what we're dealing with, but you've got different options if you have different size bearings. Then he goes ahead and puts that over and kind of gets that bearing started, and he's got his installation tool there. And then he'll go on with a washer, all comes in this toolkit, and he'll go on with the nut there. And he's going to go ahead and thread that in till it's seated up there. So that is how you set your tool up. And of course, we're going to be pressing the bearing into his left side there. Okay, with a 3/4 inch wrench there, he's going to put it over the nut. That's the side he's going to hold, which is the bearing side. Moving around to this side, he's got a 3/4 inch socket, and that's the side he's going to start tightening there. So he's tightening on this side and holding on that side, and you'll see that bearing is starting to go down into the hub. And you'll know when it's down in there all the way because it's going to get real tough to turn that wrench there. Plus, you can look on this side and see when it's flush. Okay, so now we have the primary side, the ABS bearing seated. We're going to go ahead and go back in with the spacer on the opposite side, the non-primary side. And he'll start setting up his installation tool. And he's going to put the long installation rod bolt there through. Of course, it's got that bearing on it that comes with the kit and the backing plate. Moving back around to this side. This is the bearing. This is the non-ABS bearing. And you can see it looks the same on both sides. If he flips it around, you'll see visually it looks, except one side has stamped writing on it on the edges. So look for the stamped writing, and that's the one that is going to go to the outside. The stamped writing goes to the outside. So he's putting it on the installation tool the proper way. So the stamped writing is going to be to the outside. Slides it on the installation rod there, on with his washer, and on with his nut. And one thing we'll mention is just be sure before you start tightening and stuff, make sure that backing plate is not cockeyed or anything. Make sure it's nice and level there so you get a nice pull, nice level pull. All right, and with his 3/4 socket there, on the backing plate side there, he's going to use his socket to turn. And of course, on the other side, he's just holding, this is the bearing side where we're pressing the bearings in, non-primary side, 3/4 inch wrench on that nut. And you can see that bearing going down in there and seating nicely. And he's just cranking there, and it's getting tight, as you can see, meaning those bearings are going to push up against the spacer and everything's going to be snug in there. And that bearing is flush. All right, so just one thing to note, this is the primary side that we put in, and you'll note that it's pretty much flush. It's in just a hair. That's normal because it's properly seated. It'll spin the wheel around here. We'll look at the non-primary side, and you'll want to note that that bearing, once it's seated onto the spacer there, it is actually going to be sunk in there just a ways. But as long as you tighten everything down, they're pulled up against the spacer. And again, this would be the right front of your bike non-ABS sensor for this bike. And so just be aware, don't think you did anything wrong if that's sunk in there. It should be. All right, your journey's not done on the channel. I'm popping a couple videos on the screen here for you. Hopefully some useful or entertaining, heck, maybe both. At any rate, when you're done watching videos, make sure you get out there and ride every chance you get, Bikeaholics. Peace.